Good
morning, officers, members and viewers. Thank you for attending this morning and viewing. The Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. The Council's standing orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times. Members should conduct themselves accordingly. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible. Welsh translations of this proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. So, we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies and thanks for everything from the Cabinet Member for Social Services and from the Strategic Director for Social Services.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, please. And somebody agreed it was a reasonable record. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Seconded, please. Councillor Jenkins, thank you very much. Matters arising from the minutes. I've just one matter that I'd like to go forward to the forward working programme for this committee, and it's bullet point 3. The committee requested the progress meeting to be presented twice more before the end of the council term. It's in 2027. I'm not quite sure how we do this, but I'll ask our clerk to look into how we're going to arrange that. So obviously we've got a fairly in-depth poverty strategy, and we'd like to see that it produces results within the period of this council. Even though it's a 3-year strategy spanning the council, there's no prediction of who might be here in 3 years' time. So it'd be nice to see that we've actually made some progress. Okay. Any other matters arising from the minutes? Thank you. Right, so we now go on to the annual corporate safeguarding report. Who's leading on that, please? Thank you, Ms. McDowell.
Good morning, everybody. Just to give you an overview, this is the 8th corporate safeguarding annual report, 4th that I've been involved in. I think in the last year we've seen a real gallop in terms of progress around how we're managing corporate safeguarding. We're obviously bound by legislation to kind of to carry out our corporate safeguarding responsibilities. That is mostly in social care, but notwithstanding the kind of tagline that safeguarding is everybody's business. And so we're continuously doing lots of awareness raising and making it essential for staff to recognise and respond to safeguarding concerns across the board. And certainly Newport City is committed to embedding corporate safeguarding practices and safeguarding provisions. Some of that's really evident in the work we've done in the last year. Looking at the safeguarding training data, we've done a great deal of work on that in the last year, just to kind of really interrogate some of the data that we've discussed previously in scrutiny. And some of it is around performance capturing systems not speaking to each other. So we've done quite a lot of work, and my colleague Kevin is here from HR to further explain that if necessary throughout the course of the meeting this morning. The biggest kind of, I suppose, celebration point there is that we are now, for elected members, now at 86.27% completion for the safeguarding e-learning module. And that was an improvement from 50% last year. And that has been primarily down to HR colleagues, myself and members sitting down and going through the e-learning module step by step virtually. So we can see that there are ways and means to conduct and get compliance rates to be much, much better. We know that whistleblowing is now mandatory and has been included in the annual report. There's been quite a few developments this year within safeguarding. We've had a new director. We've had an Audit Wales safeguarding inspection, corporate safeguarding audit, beg your pardon. And we know that there are some recommendations from that we've been really pushing through to get better at. We've established a new sort of governance committee, so we've got a safeguarding board now, corporate safeguarding board, a delivery group, and then a practitioner group sitting underneath it. So we've got a real flow of information throughout the whole of the local authority. We've had an adult services inspection, and I just quote one point from the inspection. This is from Care Inspectorate Wales. Their view in their published inspection, now published last week, was that local authority fosters a robust safeguarding culture, embedding the principle that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. This is a positive culture. This positive culture ensures that safeguarding principles are understood and consistently applied across the local authority and with external stakeholders. And that's to say within the Care Inspectorate Wales inspection of adult services. Education has also had an inspection, and that came out saying that we had a strong culture of safeguarding in schools. There were regular quality assurance visits and a real focus on contextual safeguarding. So that's place-based safeguarding, not necessarily familial safeguarding. So understanding neighbourhoods and areas where there are concerns and sort of gang-related instances. Channel panel continues to be chaired by myself, and that's a real focus on radicalisation and extremism and understanding some of the safeguarding components and vulnerabilities around people who are within that world under the Prevent strategy. We've seen a lot of work in the last year around Channel because of some instances around the Southport stabbing, so we're kind of running ahead of some of the developments that are happening nationally with that. Transitional safeguarding, which is an approach to safeguarding adolescents beyond the age of 18, is a key strategic priority, and we're working really hard to kind of dovetail what is traditionally children's and adult safeguarding together to understand that it isn't binary. We've got a lot more fluidity in the work that we're doing. We're doing a lot of work with our housing colleagues around understanding the needs of rough sleepers in Newport and really pushing through a better multidisciplinary oversight and action plans for individuals and understanding their complexities. We've continued to have a very positive relationship with police and health. We are working with Safe Newport colleagues around pressing on with a serious violence duty to really understand a multi-agency approach to preventing and reducing serious violence with a key focus on knife crime. We work with human resources colleagues to embed a use of management volunteers policy, as well as a safe recruitment policy, which is one of the Audit Wales recommendations. Looking at key data for safeguarding, we understand that there's been an increase in referrals, but noticeably a decrease in children who are children looked after and children on the Child Protection Register, which is a real testament to the kind of joint working that we're doing with colleagues, stakeholders, to really understand risk and manage risk in different ways than we have done maybe previously. We've seen a continual increase in adult services safeguard referrals, and we're looking in detail about some of the themes around that. Some of that will be the transitional stuff that we talked about, where we're looking at young adults coming through the system with needs, care and support needs. We're doing quite a lot of work around the professional strategy meeting, so when we have concerns about allegations of professionals, and we've got some new guidance coming in from Welsh Government around that, and we've got some workshops next week. So some of the future work we've got to really press on with the improvements around the recommendations from Audit Wales. As I say, we've got the governance structure now to make sure that that is kind of managed, and we meet quarterly. We've got the we want to review the annual corporate safeguarding self-assessment, because we did some interrogation on that. We realised it wasn't necessarily fit for purpose, so that's another work stream that we're looking at to really improve that and make that far more fit for purpose. We're developing some new safeguarding data. We're not able to report on all of that yet because we need a full year to be able to represent that next year. But that will cover all council business, not just social care work. So, for example, it will show if anybody in other parts of the service have put a duty to report in, we'll know where that's come from and what that is about. We are looking to really push on the uptake of mandatory safeguarding training and take corrective action where that isn't being complied with. And we're very keen to build and connect the Council's White Ribbon Action Plan into the Corporate Safeguarding Work Programme. So that's in a nutshell of what's been a very busy year.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, Ms Evans, Strategic Director, would you like to say anything?
Oh,
Yeah. So would any of the other officers like to say anything before we go to questions from the members? No? Okay. Thank you very much. We're asked to look at whether progress on the key priorities, areas of work of both corporate safeguarding and the arrangements, and determine if we want to make any recommendations to the Caffael members regarding this. Okay, is everyone happy with that? So over to you for questions then, please. Oh, very shy this morning. Councillor James.
I'm not shy. I don't know what you're talking about. Right, so I'd like to direct you to page 4 of the report. For us on Scrutiny Committee, it's going to be page 12, the safeguarding training data. Now, really great that members are completing more of some of this training, but I noticed that schools in particular, and you do appear to have singled schools out here, are performing quite poorly in this training, which has obviously already been described as mandatory elsewhere in the report. What are the reasons for that?
Mr. Hills? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. Lots of the training schools do is obviously around safeguarding and probably more so than perhaps we do corporately. So their understanding of safeguarding is probably far from the social services, far more in depth than probably the rest of the organisation is. And what we've been working to do over the last couple of months is understand how they're capturing that training, what systems they're using to capture that, and also ensuring that training meets the requirements in the safeguarding that involves us all training. So I don't think particularly it's an issue they don't understand safeguarding in schools, because I think that they do. It's an issue around how we're capturing that data, because schools do use different systems to the local authority. So I think, as Finn touched on, there's some work to do there in making sure we capture that robustly from schools. We're trying to avoid doing things manually and having to go to 57 schools to capture things, and how we capture that needs to be worked through in the next report, and the next quarter. I don't know if you want to add anything to that bit. I think schools are in-depth safeguarding knowledge is there, just not capturing the information.
I think
Okay.
it's the way,
Sorry, go on.
it's the way that we I've got assurances from internal and external to Ofsted, Estin, when they came in, were satisfied by our safeguarding. So they looked at the checks and balances, and I manage education safeguarding within my remit also. And I know that there's QA visits on schools looking at data, but it is also individual in how they capture their data. They don't use the same ITRED system that we use, which is our way we capture the main data for the rest of the local authority.
This sounds awfully similar to the answer I got to the similar question I asked last year. So what progress has been made on that since last year?
I think what we're doing is really understanding what our requirements are, our expectations of schools in terms of what processes they use, what systems they use. But as I say, schools are kind of single governance, although they come into Newport, but they are governed separately. And it's about kind of getting the will in the room. We've worked really closely with the Director of Education and colleagues to really understand and get a process through. What we are seeing is that we can use a connected system, which is MI Hub, to really show live data about compliance, and it's how we feed that into the way we capture the data more corporately as well.
Okay, yeah, because it looks like about 15% of school staff, for example, have completed this mandatory training. So if they don't need it, I'm not sure why they have. So we've talked about the safeguarding. What about the VODA SV and the whistle blowing as well? 60.9% of school staff outstanding training on the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, and 89.3%, which is quite a staggering figure, on whistleblowing. And actually with the violence against women training, I mean, you've singled schools out here, but children's services are the third worst performer in terms of departments. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but you know, they're probably in contact with people who need that knowledge the most. So what's going on there?
I think just to pick up the follow up on safeguarding information in schools, the head of education at the last board agreed to undertake a piece of work directly with schools and understand that and capture that information. So I
Sorry, which board?
The new safeguarding board that been mentioned. So there is activity around trying to get that resolved. Just the point about whistleblowing, I think touched on this in the report. Is a new addition to the mandatory training. So it's early days with that, but we are pushing that. Goes out regularly through staff news that people should be doing that. All these three training that are listed there. There's obviously a number of other mandatory training that don't fall into the safeguarding remit that we're not reporting here. Every month, each head of service manager, line manager gets a direct report from the information systems that we have available, informing them that people need to complete these courses and should complete these courses. So there is ongoing communication with the staff that haven't yet got to do that. Particularly the whistleblowing one, as I said, is new and developing. So I'd anticipate that will improve in 2 quarters.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was that? Yeah, so I've noticed it's very small on my screen, but you know, the method for all of these trainings are e-learning by the look. So I don't think we would need to be going into all 57 schools to do the training for a start. Roughly how long does it take to complete one of these modules?
About 35 minutes.
About 35 minutes. So we got 23.5% of corporate staff outstanding for a 35-minute safeguarding course. And you know, the figure is worse for the other courses. What recourse do we have when a staff member isn't completing that training that is mandatory?
What we talked about at the board a couple of weeks ago was that we, much like we've done with members, that actually some of those numbers are frontline staff who don't easily have access to systems and platforms. So we've talked about developing, to use a term that was used there, toolbox talks and different things with groups of staff rather than individual people going into a system and completing themselves. We'll produce videos, face-to-face activity that we can play to those staff groups that we're not managing to capture with the system. I think predominantly that 23% is those sorts of areas that are frontline services that we need to get the way of reaching, basically.
And the 45% of corporate staff outstanding on the violence against women training, is that similar or is that wider than frontline staff?
I think it's probably a little bit wider than frontline staff, and there's probably an element of managers needing to push that. Absolutely, but there are significant amount of frontline staff in that list as well that we need to capture in those 3 training programs, not just the safeguarding.
So I think this is my last question for now. What I'm not seeing on these graphs is a figure against last year. So I can't see, like, obviously I've been asking similar questions last year on these, but I can't see what progress you've made since last year. And as a member on Scrutiny, like, I feel like I'm not doing my best work if I'm not flagging that. So can you make sure that gets to us? We recommend as a committee that we get that information and that is in that report. Does this report come to council to vote on? I think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can it be in the report by the time it comes to council, please?
Before I move on to something else, this piece about training within education, if it's not within your remit to monitor that, can it be omitted from the report and can it go to an appropriate scrutiny committee? I did ask if we needed an education officer here today, and I was assured we didn't. So if this is not within your remit, Ms. Liddell, can they go to another report that goes to the appropriate committee? Because if you can't monitor it, you can't monitor it. There shouldn't be a criticism of you. Okay. Councillor Cox.
I mean, I won't go through all that again. Councillor James has been very effective, I think, in you know, raising this issue. But I mean, I would like to second her comments. I think it's not just Councillor James, I think, who's concerned about this. And I you know, I still am sort of very, very confused about this, because if this is a public document, I mean, to be quite frank, you know, if I member of Joe Public read this, I'd say, well, dear me, you know, 85% of the teachers not any training. I mean, on the one hand, we're being told we're getting very positive reports from SPIN and from the monitoring and safeguarding, and that obviously is something we are very much welcome. But that seems to be in total contradiction to the success that's been had. And I think at the very least it's very, very misleading in some respects. And I still, even though we've had this discussion, I get the issue about schools, but I still don't really understand why people who clearly here should be subject to the management of the local authority still appear not to be undertaking the training. But anyway, I won't.
No, that's a very valid point, and I think one for Mr. Howell, because you were looking at the wider community. So, you know, what actions would you recommend? If you like, we recommend to the cabinet should we put in place for the future to try and close out this obvious gap?
Yeah, I think all the points are valid, and as Finn touched on, the internal officer board structure is new. It's newly established following some recommendations that were made. Was the second meeting a couple of weeks ago, and all service areas are represented at that board meeting now. I think the director, not to speak for the director, she's not here. It's very clear that training, people undertaking the training needs to improve. It's mandated that to officers to take forward. I would hope that message is now got from the director to all those heads of service, and that by the time this report comes to this committee next time, it's an even further improvement. I take the point about last year's data's not in yet. What we do know as officers is it has significantly improved since last year. That information isn't in there, and that is probably by that review of the recommendations and various other things, new director, new management structure, etc. So it is improving. It needs to improve further.
I have a couple of questions, please, Chair. I was interested. Early on in the report, there's quite an emphasis about involving the clientele, if you like, the people who are at the sharp end of this, in terms of, you know, people who need these safeguarding services from the council. I don't know whether they're children or, you know, vulnerable adults, etc., etc. And it does emphasise that part of the strategy is to involve those people in developing policies and developing safeguard mechanisms. And I'd just be interested. I mean, for example, if a couple of it must be very difficult doing that actually with some of these. I mean, if take Prevent, for example, if Prevent is something that's got to be done very, very carefully, hasn't it? Because actually, much of what I've read, if it's not done properly, it actually stokes up maybe more resentment and makes the situation worse than it actually is. But then how do you involve young people in developing a strategy to take that forward?
I mean, one of the key components, principles of the Social Services Wellbeing Act is voice and control. So we absolutely have to involve service users or citizens in the work that we do. There's a range of ways that we're doing it. We're working collectively with a number of people with lived experience in various adults, children's remits. So, for example, we did a recent transitional safeguarding workshop in Newport, and we had somebody open and close date with lived experience, a local now adult but young person who was very involved in entrenched in criminal exploitation. After the event, he's now an adult and is able to kind of help us to work through some of those processes. We're working with a company called Fleiss, who are, that's what their expertise is. They do a lot of work with engaging citizens to help us to understand what the needs of our community are. So we do operate and use experts who do it. We do it piecemeal a bit in the work we're doing in Newport. So obviously we've got some young people, another person with lived experience helping us with our community parenting strategy. We do try and involve young people as best we can in like we've got different youth forums in the local authority too. We also use things like case studies, real life case studies. I'm thinking about the Prevent agenda. I'm delivering some training about channel and role of Prevent to the local safeguard network in Newport, and we're using a real life example. So whilst not using that young person particularly, we've anonymised it, but it is real and it is on our patch. So we're using a number of different methods where it's right to do so, that's sensitive and appropriate to assist learning and understanding based on people's actual involvement, but also kind of using their examples as well with their permission.
Chair, I have to claim that I'm a member of Fleiss.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I don't remember anything about safeguarding coming to Fleiss, but you know how you've engaged with Fleiss.
Yes, my colleague Natalie will be able to answer that question because we're doing a service review around some of the work about following the child's journey through children's services. And we're using Fleiss to be to some of our DMT meetings to kind of talk about their process and how they're going to help us with the service review.
Sorry, Councillor Cox,
the second thing I was interested in is that there's a lot of data here about referrals and young people and of vulnerable adults and so forth. What I was interested in is that what there's not a lot of information about is which in other departments you might see of sort of successes, and is there any way in which in safeguarding you can actually measure, I don't know, for example, there used to be so many rough sleepers, but now the rough sleeper team have been so effective with half the number, or there was this number of young people maybe in danger of becoming radicalised, and we've worked with them, and now, and is there anything of that kind of thing takes place?
It's something that's been in my mind around outcomes and how you measure success. I mean, it's very
it's difficult.
It's tricky, yes. Although we do have some data that we could certainly feature into it. I mean, the other thing that we have done in previous reports is put in some case studies. I don't know whether members would appreciate that as an addition.
Well, we have by our own petard here because we've asked that reports be concise.
I know, yeah, I've got a mixed feelings about case studies.
Officers not to go up into analytical detail, so you can't have it both ways. But we like graphs.
I just interested that there are mechanisms in place because it's how you measure how what we're doing is effective, basically.
Yes, it's identifying the safeguarding issue in the first place and responding to it proportionately, and then managing and measuring the success of that.
People sat there writing rings and rings of paper when they should be doing something else.
It's tricky, but something I'll certainly bear in mind because I think, there are things like the rough sleeper task force that we could look at and measure, but that's a bigger resourcing issue as well because it's about buildings, isn't it? It's not just about the safeguarding, it's about provision. So it's quite tough to kind of quantify.
Right. Councillor Linton, are you wanting to come in on this?
Sorry, Chair?
Are you wanting to come in on this point?
No, not at the minute, Chair.
No, thank you. You're,
Councillor Jean.
yes.
I had my hand up, did I?
You're bouncing about the screen for some reason, I don't.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
Councillor James.
Just to follow up on the point about case studies and concise reports, just a suggestion of a compromise. Case studies aren't really something that we can scrutinise or probe because, you know, they happened and they're case studies and that's that. But in other reports, we have little things like we're going to insert a picture of the cabinet member here. I think so. We've got a report coming up later that has a lot of that. So for balance, I mean, could you not save a space for a case study that goes in the report that goes to council, and then we get the data and everything that we would need to scrutinise? Just a suggestion.
Yeah, we obviously like you to portray your service to the best light possible. You know. It's, sorry, Councillor Costa, do you want to come back in on this one?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah,
I don't know, I didn't expect to simple answers to that.
Councillor Harris, you okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Can I draw your attention to probably page 17, and there's a number of new children being brought into referral, and it seems to be on an upward trend, and I find the numbers quite staggering. So we're ending last year with 13,165 children referred. So I say I find it staggering, but you know, perhaps one of your colleagues have put this into context. Is it because of our expanding population? Is it against a static population? Are we pulling in problems from other local authorities? Anyone please help?
I'll come in on that, Chair.
Thank you.
So in terms of we are as you've highlighted, seeing an increase in trend in referrals. I think partly due to the rising population of children in Newport, but also I think, you know, demographically we face challenges within the city. We have the cost of living crisis. So ultimately, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an influx of children that were previously known to other local authorities. I just think that generally the pressures on society at the moment are resulting in families requiring interventions from services, essentially. What we tend to do is a number of referrals that do come into social services, we will then look to support families within the community, so refer to our early intervention services. So that is prevention and inclusion. So we do try and intervene by de-escalating situations. I think what you'll be able to see through other data that we hold is that our children looked after population within Newport is comparatively low to other local authorities, which demonstrates that we are intervening in a timely way to ensure that families are receiving services to avoid children coming into care. But absolutely, it is a pressure on us in children's services, responding to the volume, but we do work with our community, third parties, in order to meet the needs of the citizens.
Thank you. Right. Are there any other questions this morning? Councillor James again? Yeah.
Yes, again, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
in that graph you referenced, Chair, there is 742 referrals coming from other. Obviously, all the other points are quite clearly defined. I was just wondering if you could give us some examples of the sorts of sources that would come under other.
Finn, just in terms of the data that we collect, so at the front door we collect data in terms of police, family, neighbours, but it might be things such as anonymous person, etc. So we do receive quite a few anonymous referrals, so they aren't necessarily categorised, but things such as police, educate. So police are our biggest referrer. We've got education, then health, etc. But then we do get some referrals from anonymous persons, or a neighbour, or another source that isn't actually listed on the referral detail that we collect when we receive the referral.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when you say local authority, does that mean other local authorities, or does that mean our local authority?
Sorry, Chair, just in terms of others, so it could be that other local authorities do refer in.
Yeah, no, sorry, specifically on local authority, where we've had 171 referrals, only 1.3%. Does that mean our local authority, or does it mean other local authorities telling us they're sending us a problem?
Yeah, it could be. So it could be an internal, that the front door referral processes. If it's internal, it may be from the local authority, but I would say the large majority of the time it would be another local authority notifying us of an incident. It could be an incident that's taken place with one of our children from Newport, but in their locality. It could be that they know a family, and that family has had contact with a family residing in Newport, and they're notifying us of issues within that family that's known to us in Newport. So they only refer on information to us where the child is and the parent is resident within our city.
Okay, thank you. Right. Nobody else has indicated they've got a question. So just before you go, can we?
Apart from saying, Chair, that I raise respect for the work that people do in safeguarding, because the pressures are on people nowadays, and you know the pressures have been on budgets and staffing and so forth. I just think they're doing an absolutely sterling job, and I think it's worth recognising.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so what do you summarise on, please?
So I've got 3 recommendations from the committee. Council James' recommendation about using comparative data throughout the report, and asking for this to be added before council and used in future reports. But your recommendation, Chair, about data that can't be monitored by FIN to go to the appropriate committee for review. And Councillor Cox, your point about recommending using data to show outcomes where possible. Is there anything anyone wants to add?
No. We're all content. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in this morning.
That's all.
All right, okay, that's good. I need that. Okay, we now move to the report on socially responsible procurement strategy 2025 to 30. A bit of a mouthful, but we had a pre-meeting on this, and most of the things we're going to be looking at today is not how Newport decide a procurement strategy, but how we look at dealing with other people's requirements and regulations. With that in mind, Mr. Lee, thank you very much for coming all on your own.
All on my own, that's absolutely fine, Chair. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Richard Lee, Service Manager for Procurement Payments. in finance. So today I wanted to run through the new procurement strategy. So the old or existing procurement strategy ran until 2024. So clearly the council needed a new strategy to take us forward over the coming years. It was quite timely actually that I was drafting the new strategy over the last 6 months, because there's been significant changes to procurement legislation both within the UK and within Wales. The biggest change we've seen in procurement legislation probably for about 20 years, mainly because of the UK in the EU and UK central government deciding that they wanted to review the procurement regulations and have a more flexible, simplified set of rules governing procurement. At the same time, Welsh Government had introduced an act called the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act. That places requirements on contracting authorities to consider certain socially responsible duties when they're going out to tender, when we're procuring goods and services. So it was opportune that the new strategy had to be redrafted at a time when the new legislation was coming into play. So all of the requirements from the new legislation that directly affect procurement and how to do things in Newport City Council have been built into the draft strategy. So would you like me to run through the main elements of the strategy? And
Sure report, please.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
You
Yeah, that's fine. I'll do a quick run through then. So as we would hopefully look to see in all strategies, there's a forward from the appropriate cabinet member, Councillor Clark, an introduction. So why is procurement important to Newport, and what we want to get out of our procurement activity, our aims, objectives, and deliverables. So we then move on to what matters to Newport. So that's linking procurement to the wellbeing objectives in the corporate plan. So I've been through the corporate plan, looked at where procurement interacts with the outputs that the corporate plan seeks to deliver, make sure that they sort of tally up with my new procurement strategy. What informs our procurement strategy? So that's very much around the legislative requirements, as I've discussed, the new Procurement Act, the Social Partnership Public Procurement Act, as well as other policies which Newport have adopted through or that have come via Welsh Government, such as ethical employment in supply chains, things like opening doors charter, making sure our procurement is accessible to SMEs, small and medium enterprises, local businesses, etc. So I sort of set the scene as to what informs our procurement strategy, how we deliver procurement, how we deliver value through a procurement cycle. So that's all about how we build procurement processes, what we factor in around specifications, our evaluation criteria, etc. So we're always looking to balance the short-term needs of service areas with the long-term requirements that we have to consider under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So that's all around ensuring that our procurement processes deliver sustainable outcomes, both for the communities of Newport and for the wider Welsh arena. I've built in a new section into this strategy around socially responsible procurement duty. So under the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act, councils now have a requirement to set socially responsible procurement objectives. That's in the new legislation. So again, timely, I've been able to build that into this strategic plan for procurement. So that there's a heavy focus now on how we want to deliver environmental improvements, how we want to deliver on social value, and also economic considerations as well. Clearly, we're cost sector, we're public sector, so we're always bound by budgets, and cost is always going to be important. So I built that into the new strategy. And then the main focus then is around the sort of 7 key delivery objectives. So hopefully the committee will see that I've considered everything that needs to be in an up-to-date socially responsible procurement strategy. So there's links to the council's climate action plan and our drive to carbon net zero and how procurement interacts with that work. how we want to deliver a social value and measuring wellbeing impacts driven through Welsh Government. That's the requirement for us now to do going forward. Promoting sustainable, innovative and outcome-based solutions. So again, that's balancing the short-term need of service areas with the long-term aims of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So we're not just making decisions that affect the now, we're trying to make decisions that affect the future as well. Ensuring our spend is accessible to local suppliers in the third sector. That's always important. It was important when I wrote the last procurement strategy. Our contract standing orders, which recently went through council, they were approved in February. We've got specific requirements in our contract standing orders, which are our internal rules on how we act procurement, to consider local suppliers. You know, so where we can target local suppliers to bid for council contracts rather than going on a sort of fully open tender process. So we've built those requirements in and you know, those options into our contract standing orders. How we advance fair work, equity and safeguarding. Obviously, we've had a thing in prior to myself. We've been working quite closely with Finn now in procurement to ensure that our tenders and our contractors are buying into our corporate safeguarding responsibilities, and we've developed a safeguarding policy for contractors. So that now goes out with all tenders. They have to acknowledge that they're going to work with us and adhere to those requirements in that policy. So we link it up with safeguarding. Managing demand and delivering value for money. Of course, procurement is, you know, is very much about getting value for money out of the council pound and out of the Newport sort of taxpayers pound. So whilst the new legislation has moved a little bit away from economically advantageous tenders, there is the recognition, of course, that we're still cost sector, we're still public sector, and we want to get the best, you know, bang for our buck. So there's requirements and aims and objectives in the new strategy to deliver that for Newport. And of course, ensuring legal compliance and robust, transparent governance. So like I said, all the legal compliance that comes from the legislation, that's all been built into the strategic plan and built into our new contract standing orders. And also in terms of transparent governance, we've got a very good and established procurement gateway process in Newport. So all sort of high value procurements are considered at the gateway board, which is essentially exec boards. It's chaired by the chief exec. Members are all the strategic directors, head of finance and myself. So all procurements which are classed as above threshold under the regulations, they go through that governance structure. They're considered by gateway board. Officers from the service areas come to gateway board and present their requirements and get asked numerous questions. How are you doing this? What do we expect to get from that? Blah, blah, blah. So we've got quite good processes in Newport for procurement, even though we're a relatively small team, so to speak. So yeah, that's it really. So the new strategy, hopefully you'll see, covers, you know, everything that it should. It links to the new legislation. It links to policy that's come out from Welsh Government and policy we've adopted in Newport, especially around social value and ethical employment and supply chains. So that's it really from me. So happy to take any questions that committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee, for your presentation. Right, questions? I'll start off then.
Okay. That might be a good question. What I need to be able to answer.
Obviously, I welcome the targeting of local suppliers. I think that's really a step in the right direction to get the value for money out of Newport. But if I were a local supplier, where would I find an index of requirements?
Okay, so under the new legislation, all contracting authorities now have to publish a pipeline notice. So we published that on the Welsh Government website, Sell to Wales, and that links into the UK Government Find a Tender service. So all contracts above £2 million that we're going to tender in the next 18 months form part of a pipeline notice. I've just published Newport's pipeline notice, so that will go live on the 25th of May. So any local contractors can see that. Also, what I'm looking to do as well, I capture information from service areas every year on all procurements of any value. So any competitive action, any contracts which the service areas need to set up in the next 12 months, I capture that information in the way of a procurement forward work plan. So in line with our new sort of website and external facing website, we're looking at potentially publishing a lot more information on what tenders would be coming up potentially. So any local suppliers, any interested parties will be able to go on the Newport City Council website and see much more information about what may be available, you know, for Newport.
Yeah, the major tenders, obviously for a new leisure centre or something like that.
Yes.
The notification is just similar to the EU notification we had before, where you had to publish it so far in advance.
Correct.
I was thinking more of the bread and butter stuff. You know, if we had somebody who manufactured shovels, spades, anything like that.
Yeah.
How would they know that the council requires 500 spades a year or whatever?
Not an easy one to answer, I suppose. A lot of our common and repetitive spend requirements. So, for example, office furniture, stationery, cleaning materials, your run-of-the-mill products, they tend to be procured off collaborative frameworks. So Welsh Government may let a framework for the supply of cleaning materials, for example, and in Newport we would use that framework in order to procure our goods. By buying off frameworks, it's a far simpler process for us to follow, less time consuming. The contractors are all pre-vetted, etc. And we just go to those framework providers and procure our requirements. So a lot of our common and repetitive spend type requirements are dealt with like that. Another example, so personal protective equipment. We're working on a PPE contract at the moment. So Welsh Government have got an overarching framework with a number of suppliers on. That allows Newport to undertake what's called a mini competition or a further competition. So we put our requirements out to that select list of suppliers and they bid against that. We've got a generic email address, procurement@Newport, which is on our website. So any suppliers that have got general type questions, can I supply the council with shovels? How many do you need? They can come through to procurement and we can answer those individually. But as you can imagine, you know, we procure many thousands of different products and goods and services, so it would be difficult to put all of that information out, you know, on our website. But we're definitely looking to publish more information than we've done in the past, to, you know, to sort of try and, you know, generate interest within, you know, Newport-based suppliers and local Welsh suppliers.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor James and Councillor Thomas.
Hiya. I've noticed in the report, and I'm not sure whether this comes under you or under environment, but on the report, I've noticed that under scope 2 of the supporting council's net zero ambition, I actually don't have the page number in front of me, sorry, but scope 2 on indirect emissions seems to suggest we're using an energy supplier that is generating through fossil fuels. I'm sure, maybe I'm wrong, but the procurement of our energy supplier might fall to you. So I'm just wondering if you had any knowledge of how our energy is generated at the moment, the energy we pay for, and how often do we search for alternative suppliers?
Newport use the Welsh Government Commercial Division contract for energy for both gas and electricity. So that's a contract which is managed by the Welsh Government Commercial Division. So we don't directly go out to tender ourselves. We're part of a much bigger collaboration. So many local authorities and other public bodies in Wales will group our requirements together. So we get hopefully better value for money through our requirements. Welsh Government actually use the Crown Commercial Service, CCS, energy frameworks to undertake our procurement. So Crown Commercial Service, part of UK government, they've got, again, much bigger pot of spend, if you like. So instead of, for example, Newport going to market with our, I don't know, 20 kilowatts of electricity a year, whatever it is, we go to market as part of Crown Commercial Services with 100 times that volume. So that delivers value for money. I'm not directly involved in the energy procurement because it's done at a national level, and our climate team, Ross Cudlipp's team, manage the energy requirements for Newport City Council. Scope 2, like you say, is indirect emissions. I work on Scope 3 emissions, which is our third-party spend, if you like. So I work very closely with the carbon team. We do an analysis of our spend profile every year, and we work with the top suppliers who are generating the most CO2, looking at their systems, procedures, looking at their energy consumption, and looking for those efficiencies. So that is ongoing work on our sort of Scope 3 emissions that I'm directly involved in.
Okay, thank you.
As you appreciate, Councillor James, it's a very complex subject. What actually is green energy, and to actually separate it out. Perhaps we could go back to the old days when we had our own power station on Corporation Road, and we weren't exactly sure what we were generating. Councillor Cox and then Councillor Linton.
I had a couple of questions actually. Okay. One is, it sounds like a heck of a lot of work. I mean, if I was like a council procurement officer days gone by, I might have just been saying, you know, that this all been done properly according to the rules. You know, which is the cheapest, which is the best value. But now they're going to say which is the best value, which is going to, you know, the biggest impact on carbon, which is going to be socially, you know, social impact. You know, is this company conforming with, I don't know, the living wage? And so what's the impact being had on the workload?
The new legislation, frustratingly, as I mentioned earlier, the idea from UK government was to create a simpler legislative framework for procurement in the UK. What they've done is really up the ante on the transparency requirements. So I haven't touched too much on that, but the transparency requirements is all around what public notices we need to generate when we're undertaking procurements. To give you an example, the minimum number of notices we could publish in December was 2. Contract notice advertising the opportunity and a contract award notice advertising who's won that contract. On an above threshold procurement now, we can potentially be looking at 12 public notices for the same tender. So they've really upped the ante on transparency. That is frustrating myself and all of my peers across Wales, because we're having to spend a lot more time producing notices which go out on South Wales, the Welsh Government sort of portal for advertising and transparency, and that feeds into the Find a Tender service in UK government. So we've got more work to do, unfortunately. Of course, I don't get any more resource to do that, so it is taking time.
So what gives?
I don't know the answer to that. Nothing really gives, because our work is our work. We've just got to try and get through it the best way we can. I'll give you an example. I've talked about collaboration, and I've talked about frameworks a little bit this morning. Frameworks for us are a simpler way to go to tender, because a lot of the pre-work has been done to select suppliers. So think of it as like a pre-qualification exercise. So a number of suppliers bid for a framework contract, they go through a qualification process, they get appointed onto that framework. When we then undertake a mini competition, we haven't got to do a lot of the work that has been done already to get the suppliers onto the framework. So it's a simpler way for us to procure. So when anybody comes to procurement and says we need to buy this, we all...
Councillor Linton, can you go mute, please? You are.
We always look at what public sector frameworks are available, because it's a quicker, easier route for us to procure. To pick up on the other point you raised, procurement is getting more complex in what we have to consider. Under the old legislation, there was something known as meet most economically advantageous tender. That's what we have to consider. UK and Welsh government have dropped the economical element of that and just have got mapped now, so most advantageous tender. And the idea of that is contracting authorities like Newport, we look at the wider social benefits our procurement can bring. Yeah, so over the last couple of years, Newport have adopted the Welsh National TOMS, a mechanism to demonstrate social value delivery through procurement. So we've built that into our procurement process. So there's a lot more going on. There's social value, there's carbon, there's making sure suppliers go through a robust qualification process, even before we look at their price. Do you know what I mean? So it is quite a complex area. We're only a very small procurement team in Newport. Actually, I've got 2 senior procurement officers and 1 trainee, essentially doing all of the procurement for Newport City Council. So
will that increase the costs of the companies tenders forward because we've got this information?
Potentially, yes. You know, we have to recognise that when companies bid for public sector contracts, we're asking for lots of information. So the longer they sit there filling out the tender, essentially is taking somebody's time. Another element of the new legislation is around SME-friendly procurement. So what the legislation is trying to do is to make sure people like me and contracting authorities don't make tender processes any more rigorous than they need to be. So it's horses for courses. So if it's quite a simple, low-value tender, we're not asking for reams and reams of information. Yeah, we're more interested in the quality of the product and the service and the price. So there is a requirement on us now under the new legislation to consider the impact on local businesses and SMEs in the way we conduct procurement. So instead of asking, you know, in days gone by, we may have asked for, can you send in a copy of your health and safety policy? Can you attach all of your insurance certificates, you know, your employer's liability, public liability, professional indemnity, blah, blah, blah. We don't do that now going forward. We ask that they have these things in place. And then if they are an appointed contractor, if we win that business, then we get that information before we contract. So we try to limit the impact on suppliers.
So that's for information post.
Yes, post-award decision. Yeah. So rather than everybody, if you imagine if we go out on an open tender, we might have 15 companies, let's say, bid for that work. If 15 companies sent in their health and safety policy and all, you know, it wouldn't be like that because it's all electronic, but you get the idea. So the idea of the new legislation is it's more of a tick. Have you always liability insurance? Should you need it? Yes. Tick, 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 tick. The appointed contractor then is the only one that has to send this stuff. So it takes away that element from every bidder. Yeah.
But when you're bidding into these sort of big, you know, the Welsh, I don't know, energy sort of consortium, whatever, I think that's it.
Yeah.
They've done all the pre-work first in terms of, you know, carbon emissions, in terms of.
Yes. All the pre-qualification.
Yeah. So, right, okay. So, what I'm trying to get my head around really is when it comes to this, in theory, I mean, what I've read about it, you know, it's new socially responsible contracting. I mean, it's not just in the UK, is it? Apparently, it's really taken off this across Europe and in the States and whatever. It's quite exciting, actually, the potential of it. But to what is it possible to say what proportion of that budget is 100% of the council's budget going down this road now with all these checks taking place in terms of social value, etc., or is it just a proportion of the council's budget?
It's a proportion.
And how much?
So all procurements above £75,000 contract value, we consider carbon reduction. Yeah, so carbon reduction starts at contracts above £75,000. Social value is primarily above threshold contracts. So for goods and services, that's about 175,000 excluding VAT, and for works contracts about 5.4 million. So it's not all contracts have to have those considerations. Again, it's horses for courses. It's trying to balance the information that we're seeking from contractors linked to value. If we put carbon and social value into every low value tender, it's just going to put suppliers off. It's too much work all the time. So it needs to be more focused. Where can we see those benefits from carbon reduction? You know, so for example, if we were going out for a consultancy where a person is sat at a computer, maybe working on a project, delivering a report, it's not a lot of carbon savings we can try and pull out of that, if you like, you know. Whereas if we're going out to tender for a load of plant and machinery down at a waste site, we would then factor in servicing intervals, fuel consumption, spare parts costs, so that whole life costing. So where we can, we look at whole life costing, not just initial purchase price.
Because in the report, it says you're obliged to report now, aren't you? Is it every 6 months to the cabinet?
I do a report every 6 months on social value delivery through.
And you're giving us some sort of scale of how much money we're talking about.
Correct. Yeah. So where we can, the TOMS framework, which is the Welsh National TOMS, themes, opportunities and measurements. A lot of the social value descriptors come with a proxy value. So if we do this is roughly what it means in monetary value, if you like. So I report on that 6 monthly to Cabinet.
And can I ask one last final question? Okay, so I'm supplying you with whatever, you know, and it's a wonderful tender because I've done great local jobs and I'm an SME, and, you know, I'm for the environment and all the rest of it. Well, to what extent do you monitor all that's actually happening? That must be quite.
The truthful answer to that is, from a procurement perspective, we don't monitor that very closely. We simply haven't got the resource.
I can imagine,
Yeah, contract management is dealt with at service area level. So once my team have undertaken the procurement and have awarded the contract, it's over then to the service areas to, obviously they're the ones working with that contractor. So for example, you know, we do a street lighting maintenance contract. That was an 8-year contract. It actually expires later this year, early next year. We delivered that contract for the infrastructure team. Their street lighting engineer is the gentleman that works with that contractor week in, week out. They have a weekly meeting on a Friday morning, looking at performance, looking at the work schedule. So contract management is undertaken at service area level.
So if we'd awarded a contract to somebody who was going to, you know, be socially responsible and hit all the buttons, and if that wasn't happening at a service level, would you find out about that?
Yes, in the main, yes, yeah. So our contract, we've developed a contract management framework in Newport. I introduced it in 2023. So all service managers in the council that manage contracts should be adhering now to the contract management framework. And in there, there's templates and requirements for like key performance indicators and reporting, etc. So yeah, we're trying to give that information out to the service areas so they do a better job on contract management. I mean, to be honest with you, contract management, I've been in procurement 34 years, believe it or not. And I work across, I sit on the National Procurement Network for Wales and the South East Wales Regional Delivery Group. Contract management as a function in the public sector is not brilliant across the whole of the public sector. It's a lot of it is down to resource, you know. We don't have the staff to, we tend to only find out if there's problems, not good service delivery, if you like.
So if I find you,
not so much in procurement because it doesn't sit with us, but it's an issue for the council contract management, the same as every council. council, to be honest.
The person who wants the job done, the procuring officer, comes to procurement management and they say, this is what we want done. So they should know what they want before they start, and they should have an idea of how they're going to monitor what they want done. They come to these guys to get best value and to comply with all these good things the Welsh government has asked us to do. But then when they actually come to putting a spade in the ground, well, if they wanted the spade put in 1 spin deep, they need to find out how they're going to monitor it. It's gone in 1 spin deep. Not like the unscrupulous contractor who might just put it in half a spin deep. There's been known to happen. But I think you're misunderstanding Mr. Leake's role on this with asking about the end procurement. Right, Councillor Linton, you've been quite patient now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Basically, I think you've answered a lot of my questions regarding the framework agreements and the like.
Okay.
The frameworks and value for money, do we collaborate with other local authorities in our purchasing? Does that all come under the Welsh Government?
It doesn't come under Welsh Government, but yes, we do collaborate with other local councils. So I mentioned I sit on the South East Wales Regional Delivery Group. So that's the 10 authorities in South East Wales. We look at where we've all got similar requirements for goods or services, where there isn't an existing public sector framework contract in place. And then we look at opportunities to bring that all together, and one authority goes out to tender on behalf of the 10, or maybe the 5 if it's a smaller collaboration. Local government in Wales, especially South Wales, have been doing that for probably 40 years, to be honest with you. When I joined procurement in 1990, there was the Welsh Purchasing Consortium, the WPC. I don't know whether anybody remembers that. So that was a collaboration of the 12 authorities across sort of South Wales to start with, and that was expanded as the years went on. So yes, we've always worked closely with other councils on common and repetitive spend requirements. So that is standard practice for us. Yeah, that's different to larger collaborative framework contracts that Welsh Government directly lead on as well. So it's sort of two-tier, if you like.
Okay, what about value engineering? Do you take into account this when you're tendering and you know?
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't catch the first half of that.
Would you take into account the value engineering on the projects or whatever you're tendering when it comes back?
Yes, so on large construction contracts, so we don't lead on large construction contracts. They're delivered by Newport North currently, and they will fall into the new sort of LATCO that the council are putting together at the moment. So value engineering very much takes place, as far as I know, on major construction projects. So for example, on the new leisure centre, there was a lot of value engineering post tender submission, because the tenders came in over budget. So the project team worked with the preferred contractor on value engineering to bring those costs down in line with the budget. So yeah, on major construction projects, value engineering, to my knowledge, does take place where it needs to. Yeah.
And of course, whatever contract you're putting out is going to be fit for purpose, and there are overarching regulations, British standards, international standards, etc., that constrain what you can ask for in terms of, is it possible? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can't put a contract out or a tender out that requires specifications or requirements that are lower than legislative requirements. We can go above, we can go beyond what legislation requires. What we can't do is ask somebody to do something which isn't compliant. So yeah.
Councillor Linton, I think we were still with you.
Yes, sorry, and another question. Do we still have to comply and go out to the European Union on tenders over a certain value again, or is that stopped?
No, the simple answer is no, we don't. So we're not part of the EU anymore, so we don't have to consider bids necessarily from all EU countries and advertise our opportunities there. However, we are part of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, so we have to consider bids from any WTO registered countries. The main difference being now is our tender opportunities aren't directly advertised in what was known as the OJEU, the official journal of the European Union. That is now more localized to the UK. So I've mentioned the Find a Tender service. So that is the UK government's equivalent of the European website and advertisement portal. But we have to consider tenders if we get them from WTO member organisations.
Okay, you see.
Sorry, my microphone won't go off then. And on the chat function, the raised hands isn't there no either. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you anyway for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
The clerk did explain before the meeting that the chat function doesn't work at the moment. So do we know why?
Type of meeting doesn't support it at the minute.
Oh, right, okay. Right, any other questions?
I don't know if we normally do this anyway, but it really, I've really been fascinated around how all this is going because it's relatively new, isn't it?
The legislation, the current legislation, only came into play on the 24th of February this year.
It's been fascinating listening to it. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to hear how it's going sometime in the future.
But nothing has changed. They've just given us a different template to work with.
It's just a different set of rules. Yeah, we've always had to comply with EU.
That just used to put time on the job, didn't it? Really? Because you had to pre-plan, you had to know.
Well, I mean, the bit I'm really interested in, obviously, is the sort of the social side of it, the social procurement and community wealth building.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And also Welsh Government are also on the social value side. Welsh Government are looking at what they want to call wellbeing impacts that are delivered through procurement as well. They've been considering it for probably a couple of years now, but nothing's come out yet. But yeah, they're looking at contracting authorities to measure against wellbeing impacts in the future as well. So that'll be more data we need to produce with limited resources. But yes.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody else, okay? Thank you very much. Right. Well, I don't think we've done any recommendations.
I haven't got anything to do.
And I don't think really we've got the expertise to offer recommendations for this particular report. Just to thank you very much for your attendance this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. It's very interesting. Okay. Yeah. Cheers, everybody.
So that takes us now to the report.
Yeah, so to me if that's okay.
Certainly for page 57.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Chair. The first thing I know is the obvious one is that there's no forward work programme in this. It's obviously what our last meeting of the municipal year. Then the forward work programmes have been completed in draft form. They're going to go to our next Scrutiny Chairs meeting now for the AGM, and then they'll be presented to committee in our first meeting. So don't panic, it's all underway. The second thing I want to note is that obviously there are some outcomes missing in the sheet that we have in our pack, but I do have an update from the head of People Policy and Transformation, and I'll just share those with you now quickly. So against the first outcome action, the committee recommended including sections in the consultation survey where participants can offer alternative suggestions to budget saving proposals. The reply was noted feedback for future consideration. The existing survey provides residents with the opportunity to provide alternative budget savings if they want to avoid making specific budget savings. Against the second recommendation regarding including specific questions regarding different service areas and their service provision, The response was noted for future consideration. The questions regarding the different service provision has previously been included as part of pre-budget engagement. There will be a question on the satisfaction of different service provision as part of the upcoming National Resident Survey. Work with services to improve direct engagement with residents on proposals as appropriate is ongoing. Against the third, regarding using ward meetings as opportunities to gather consultation feedback. The response here is noted feedback for future consideration. Board meetings outline the budget and we will consider how to better gather feedback at these meetings. And finally, on the fourth, recommendation is regarding the future budget consultations beginning after Christmas to maximise engagement. This is noted feedback for future consideration. The timescales will be reviewed to maximise engagement opportunities while ensuring there's enough time to meet democratic process. So they will ticked off, and I need that outcome sheet is all complete. What I'll do is I will mark everything as complete and include that in the next pack, just so you can see transparency that they have been done, even though I think we will be able to update today. Similarly, our action sheet is all up to date. Is there any questions or anything the committee want to raise at this point?
The only thing I wanted to ask you to do is on the anti-poverty strategic plan to ensure that this goes forward to next year and the year after.
And was that as a full agenda item, Chair, or as an information report to be shared with committee, or how did committee feel best they would receive that update?
Well, it depends what format it comes in, isn't it? If it's a long report, then
Well, we're looking for progress.
Yeah.
So
Should we say full
and-
meeting?
and-
Do you want to put it down as a full meeting item?
Well, it can be attached to a meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
It shouldn't take long to tell us exactly what progress they've made.
No problem.
Because it's encompassing all departments of the council. I don't think anybody's missed off the committee.
Brilliant. Make note of that, Chair. That's something we can also look at again if we need to. Part of the board programme. Is there anything else?
No, I don't think so. Nobody else is indicating.
Brilliant.
Okay. Everybody okay? Well, thank you very much for your attendance this morning. End action piece of business.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Go offline.